Alright, welcome back. In this video, we're going to start by tackling some of the basic functionality of our list. We're going to start nice and easy by adding the click listeners to the LIs, so that when we click, we get a little strike-through effect that you can see here, and they gray out. And before we do that, I'm actually going to change our background a little bit here. I'm going to get rid of that background, and then I'm going to add a border instead. So our border will be 2-pixel solid gray. Just a small change, but it will make it so that it's easier to see when we turn these gray. If we had a gray background, then it would just totally blend in. Okay, so what we want to happen is when we click on an LI, the text inside the LI is gray, and we add a strike-through effect. So let's go to our JavaScript file. Let's start by adding a simple comment where we can check off specific to-dos by clicking. And then let's make that work. So we need to select all the LIs. So all we need to do is LI inside of the $, and then we'll do a .click. And when we click, here's the function that we want to run, the callback function. And we'll start with just a nice alert, clicked LI. And go back and make sure that when we refresh and click on an LI, it tells us that we clicked an LI. But nowhere else does that happen. Great. Next up, let's work on changing the individual LI that we clicked on and changing its color and the strike-through or the text decoration effect. Rather than alerting, what we want to do is use the .css method. And with .css, we're going to want to work with the color property and turn color gray, and the text decoration property and make that line through. Let's start with the color. So it would look like color gray, just like that. And then we have to decide what are we applying that to, what are we selecting. And this is not what we want to do. If we just select LI and do .css, now when I click, they all turn gray. And I know that's a little bit difficult to see. If I make that something more obvious, like red, when I click, they all turn red, which is not what we want. What we want instead is only the one that was clicked, and that's where the keyword this comes in with the jQuery wrapper. This refers to the specific LI that was clicked, and we want to change only that one CSS so that its color is gray. And we'll test that out. Now I click on the individual LI and it turns gray. Of course, it doesn't turn back to black when I click again. We don't have that functionality. Now let's get the strike-through or the line-through effect. So we can do another line like this .css, and then text decoration, colon or comma, line dash through, and save, and go back. We're missing a parenthesis here. Now when we click, we get a strike-through effect there, and the color changes to be gray. But of course, there's always an easier way of doing that. So rather than doing it on two separate lines, you might have remembered how we could define an object with key value pairs and just do one single this.css call. So we'd add an object in here, just like that. And we need to add in color gray, comma. And this is a little tricky. If we do text dash decoration in the object and set that to be line through, and I save and refresh, you see nothing happens. And I actually get an error because in JavaScript, you can't have property names that have hyphens in them. So if we are using the syntax where we define an object, we need to use text decoration camel case, which is always a little bit tricky. And if we refresh now, you can see that it finds that text decoration CSS property and it applies the line through and the gray color. The next thing we might want to do is turn it back to black and get rid of the line through when we click again. To do that, we'll use a simple if statement. So we'll check if LI is gray, then we will turn it black, else turn it gray. So to check if the LI is gray, we can do if, and we can use this.css. And if we just do it like this, so if, to check if an li is gray, we can actually use this.css and ask it for color without providing another value, and that will retrieve the current color. So we'll have an if statement, if this.css of color is equal to gray. Let's just do a console.log. It is currently gray. And that's all we'll do to start. So let's clean this up a little bit. And we don't have our else yet, so we'll just leave it how it is and go back. So if we refresh and we open up the console and I click on one of these, it doesn't tell us anything yet because it's not gray. But now if I click again, it still doesn't work. And the reason for that is a little bit tricky. If we go back here, let's take a look at what this.css color is outside of the if statement. So we'll do a console.log this.css color and refresh the page. And when I click, you'll see that it starts out as RGB 000. And if I click again, we're setting the color to be gray, and we think that it's gray right now. If we inspect it, it says that color is gray, but when I click again, it's actually the RGB version. So when we're comparing to check if the color is equal to gray, that's not going to work. We need to compare it to RGB 128, 128, 128. And now if we try this and refresh, we should see when I click the first time, nothing. I click again, it now says it is currently gray. Okay, so we can use that. So instead of just printing it is currently gray, what we want to do is turn it black. So we'll do a this.css color, and we'll just go back to black, just like that. And then we can handle the text decoration in just a second. So we refresh and we click and we get gray. And if I click again, it still won't work. And that's because we're just overwriting it at the end here. We're turning it gray every time. So we want to move that into our else. So we'll add an else statement here. And we'll do this only if it's not currently gray. All right, so we should be good now. Let me just move this comment here, clean things up a little bit, and refresh. We click, it turns gray. Click again, it goes back to black. We still have the line through, but at least the color is changing. So to get rid of the line through, all we need to do is basically copy this where we do an object. And rather than setting color to be gray, we'll make it black. And rather than text decoration to line through, we'll set it to be none. And now if we refresh and we click, we're toggling that done on and off, where we have the gray and the line through. Hopefully, as we're going through this, you're seeing that it's sort of a lot of work to do this checking. Is it currently gray, RGB 128, 128, 128? If it is, then we'll make it black and remove the text decoration. Otherwise, do this. There's a much easier way that we don't have to actually do any of this logic. What we can do is create a class. So we'll create a class in our CSS, and we'll call it .completed, or just completed. And it will have color is gray. We don't need those quotes. We're not in JavaScript. And text decoration will be line through, and save. And then in our todos.js, we can actually replace all of this code. I'm going to delete it all. And all we want to do is this .toggle class completed. Single line. So when we click on an li, we're going to toggle the class on the li that we clicked on, the class completed. And that will make it gray and give it a line through effect, and it will keep track of if it needs to remove it or add it automatically. So you can see here, it looks exactly the same as it did before, but we only had to write one line of code rather than 10 or so lines. In the next video, we'll talk about how we can get the X to actually delete a to-do.